All right, guys, so today we are going over the review sheets. Heads up, and let's pay attention. Heads up, let's pay attention. So the first thing we're looking at is problems 1 through 4. We want to find the sum of the interior angles for any polygon. Yes. Yes. You're welcome. Now, the sum of the interior angles for any polygon is given to us by the formula n minus 2 times 180. And this formula here will give us the sum of the interior angles for any and all polygons. So if we look at, say, decagon, well, decagon is a 10-sided polygon. So we would do 10 minus 2. Yes, which would be? Would be the sum of the interior angles for this here. So depending on the number of sides, we plug it in for n. And it will tell us the sum of the interior angles for any polygon. Any other questions on 1 through 4? Mm-hmm. 37 minus 2 times 180, which would be 35 times 180. 6,300 degrees. Yes. All right. Now the next one asks for one interior angle of a regular polygon. Well, we'll use a similar formula for this here, our n minus 2 times 180, because that'll give us the sum of the interior angles. And if we divide it by n, the number of sides, because all the angles are going to be congruent, it'll give us one angle in a regular polygon. So if we say 27agon, I can say 27 minus 2 times 180 divided by 27, because all the angles will be congruent. And at this point here, we can plug this into a calculator, and it'll tell us that all the angles are 166.667 degrees. Yep. Because we're taking the sum and dividing it by the number of angles. And it would work with any of these here. Any questions on 1 through 8? Nine through 11 is find the sum of the exterior angles for each polygon. Well, the sum of the exterior angles is 360. No matter the number of sides, it is always going to be 360. So it really doesn't matter if I know what the number of sides are. The sum of the exterior angles is always 360. Now, just like finding one interior in a regular polygon, one exterior angle is we can take the sum of the exterior angles and divide it by the number of sides. So for, say, a 30gon, well, we would take the sum and divide it by 30. And 360 divided by 30 would be 12. Any other questions on 12, 13, 14, or 15? (16 through 19) is classifying the polygon based on the number of sides, or classify the polygon by the number of sides based off the sum of its interior angles. Is there one of these four that y'all want to look at in particular? 19? Okay, 17 and 19 will work out the exact same. Now, n minus 2 times 180 gives us the sum of the interior angles. Now, for 19, it told us that the sum of the interior angles is 15,300. So we'll set it equal to our n minus 2 times 180 and solve for the value of n. Well, the first thing we need to do is to divide both sides by 180. Well, here the 180 and 180 will simplify, leaving us n minus 2 is equal to question? So the first thing we need to do is divide both sides by 180, which leaves us with n minus 2 is equal to 85. At this point here, we can add 2 to both sides, telling us that n is equal to 87 degrees. And, yes. And we would call this an 87 1. Any other questions on these four here? Yeah, that's classifying it by the number of sides. Because if it had 9 sides, we would call it a nonagon. Any questions on this here? Any questions on 20, 21, 22, or 20, 23, or 24? One of those in particular that y'all want to look at. 20. Now, as we look at this polygon here, we want to solve for the value of x. We're wanting to find this x value. Now, we do notice that this has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 sides. And we can use our formula n minus 2 times 180, so 6 minus 2 times 180, to find out what the sum of all these angles would be. And if we plug this in, we see that this is 720 degrees. So the sum of all these angles is 720. So what we can do is we can take 2x plus 38 plus 160 plus 130 plus 100 plus 80 and set this equal to 720. And for most of these here, we do need to figure out what the sum of the interior angles is based off the number of sides.
So add them all together and subtract from 120, and that'll give you your answer.
Well, 720, yes. So 38 plus 160, 130, 180, all add up to be 508. Yes. So it tells us that 2x is equal to 212. And lastly, we would need to divide both sides by 2, telling us that x is equal to 106. So for 20, 21, 22, 23, and 24, so this here has 6 sides, also it has 6 angles. To figure out the sum of the interior angles we're using are n minus 2 times 180. Because n minus 2 times 180 will give us the sum of the interior angles. And because it didn't tell us what it was, we had to find it. So this here, a 6-sided figure, ended up having the sum of the interior angles being 720. So we added all the angles together and it set it equal to that. Because we had 2x. Any other questions on number 20? Any questions on 21 or 22?
You did the same thing on 21 since it's 2 of the x's, right?
Yeah, because we would add those 2 x's together and get 2.
That one you wouldn't have to divide it, you just go with that.
Yes. So if we look at 23, well, these 3 angles are all the same. Now we do have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 sides. So the sum of these interior angles is 720. Because again, we can use the fact that n minus 2 times 180, so 6 minus 2 times 180 will give us the sum of the interior angles. And we just did this one a minute ago, and it told us that it's 720. Now what we can do is add our angles together, so we'd have x plus x plus x plus 130 plus 170 plus 140 is equal to 720. Yes.
Not trying to be ridiculous, I'm just asking a question. Why can't you just say, like, instead of adding plus the x, that confuses the crap out of me. So just add 130 plus 170 plus 140. Forget about the x's. You already know you gotta have it. And then say.
So what is all those added together?
Subtract them from 720.
So all this is what?
All that.
Almost. Okay.
And then just I know it all comes out to the same thing.
So subtract it and we get what?
Subtract 720, you're going to get.
Huh? Because
There's 3 angles. They're all the same, so they're x.
Yeah.
Oh, it's because I'm on the wrong.
And then what would we do next?
And then you divide that by 3.
Yeah.
I think I divide that.
Because we're saying we have 3 of that unknown value.
Yeah.
So x is equal to?
280 divided by 3. I don't know. Use calculator. I got one.
9 is 27. 27's 10. Yep. So each one of those angles is 93 and a third.
Sorry, it's just hard for me finishing it. I get it in my head.
Okay.
Like, doing numbers and stuff. I know I do it in my head. Just whenever you draw those lines and everything up there, like, like I wouldn't even. I don't even think about doing the 3x divided by 3 because that's irrelevant. Just all you have to do is 280 divided by 3.
Well, that's doing the exact same thing.
That's what was confusing me a couple chapters back whenever you put that up there. I was like, what is that? I was like, okay.
Yeah.
It's just scroll down.
Any other questions on 20 through 24? All right. Let's look at 25 through 28. Which one of these in particular do you all want to look at? 25. Now, when we look at this here, the variables, what we're trying to solve for, are all on the exterior. And the sum of the exterior angles is always what? 360. So we can add these together, 2x minus 1 plus x plus 64 plus, well, this angle over here is 90 plus, well, we are missing this angle down here. But the interior angle and the exterior angle, what? Well, these two angles will make a straight line because the interior angle and the exterior angle will always add together to be 180. That'd be 7. Because the interior angle and the exterior angle will make a straight line. They'll add up together to be 180. 25. Now we can add all the variables together, all the ones with x. So 2x plus x is 3x. And then we can add the other terms together. So we can add negative 164, 90, and 45. And if we add all these together, we get 198 is equal to 360. Now at this point here, we can subtract 198 from 360, which will tell us that 3x is equal to 2, which should be 162. And last but not least, we would divide 162 by 3. And this time we do get a nice number. It depends on the instructions, because here it just says to solve for the value of x. So if we wanted to, we could plug it back in and see what those two angles were, but we don't have to. Yes, ma'am? You're good. Yeah, we could end up saying that this is 54 degrees, and that would be 107, because 54 times 2 would be 108, and minus 1 would give us 107. Any other questions on these four here? Yes, sir. We don't have anything telling us that they would be. They might look like they should be, but unless we're told any information about them being congruent, we can't assume it. Yes, sir.
Same thing as Rhombus. It's all going to be 36 or 360.
For the sum of the exterior angles?
Yeah.
Yes. Because the sum of the exterior angles is always 360. Any other questions on this here? So are we good with 26 and 27? Let's look at 29 through 38. So these here, we're naming the polygons in the most specific way. Yes?
Should be equilateral, not equilateral.
So if we look at 29, we're not giving any information about the angles or sides or any properties that they have. So the most we can say it is a quadrilateral. We can say that it has 4 sides. Now 30, we are told that the opposite sides are congruent. We have 2 sets of parallel lines. And we do have a right angle, so this would be a rectangle. Only naming the most specific. Yep. Because we do have the 2 sets of opposite sides, and because we do have 1 right angle, the opposite angles are congruent since it is a parallelogram. Consecutive angles are supplementary, which would mean all 4 had to be 90. Well, 31 would be a kite. Because a kite is a quadrilateral with 2 sets of consecutive congruent sides. 7.52. 32 would be a
Square.
33 is a, because it does have the opposite angles are congruent. 34 would be a rhombus. 35. Isosceles trapezoid. Because a trapezoid is a 4-sided figure with 1 set of parallel lines. And if the base, or if the legs, the sides that are not parallel are congruent, it's going to be isosceles. Where 36 is just going to be a trapezoid. Because the non-parallel sides are not congruent. Quadrilateral. Both of these would be a quadrilateral because we don't have any information about the sides or angles. Any other questions on these here? Questions on 43 or 44? Huh? We're not doing the 39 through 42. They won't be on there. So looking at this here, this is a parallelogram. And inside of a parallelogram, the opposite angles are congruent. So that means we can say that 3y minus 11 is equal to 2x plus 35. We can also say that 5x minus 30 is equal to 3x plus 20. Now the equation in black does have 2 different variables, so we can't solve that one yet. But the one in red has x on both sides, so we can solve for the value of x. And once we get it, we can solve for the value of y. Yes. Now the first thing we can do here, well, we can plus 30, because we will do that here eventually. So 2x minus 30 is equal to 20. Then we can add 30 to both sides. Which will tell us that 2x is equal to 50. Lastly, we can divide both sides by 2, telling us x is equal to 25. Any questions on how we found the value of x? Or set this up to solve for the value of x?
Hey, just noticed this and I figured I'd tell you.
Yeah. Now we can take this value of x and plug it into the other equation to solve for the value of y. So we can say 3y minus 11 is equal to 2 times 25 plus 35. Really, at this point here, the 2 times 25 plus 35, we could actually just type that into a calculator. And we would get 96, because 2 times 25 is 50. And 50 plus 35 would be 85. Now, when we do add 11 to both sides, we would get that 3y is equal to 96. And last but not least, we would so y is 32 and x is 25. Any other questions on this here?
Let's go on ACT.
Possibly.
Looks like the rest of this speech looks like it might take you.
Any other questions on 43? Questions on 45 or 46? So 46, these two here are going to be congruent to each other. So we can set it up as 5x minus 6 is equal to 4x plus 2. Then we can solve for the value of x by first subtracting 4x from both sides, which tells us x minus 6 is equal to 2. And then we can add 6 to both sides. Tyler? Minus x is equal to 8. And that's all we would need to do for this here.
Oh, never mind.
Because when you minus the 5x from both sides, it's 4 minus 5 would be negative 1. Yep. And then when you divide by the negative at the end, it'd become back positive. Any other questions on 45 or 46? Really? Questions on 47 or 48? Mhm. Questions on 49 or 50? Pretty much, yes. Because the opposite angles are congruent, and the consecutive angles in these parallelograms are supplementary. They add together to be 180. Okay. Guys, let's look at this here. Any questions on 51 or 52? Tyler?
It was clean. It was clean.
Okay. Questions on 53 or 54? Okay.
Actually, yeah, I wasn't here for this part. We'll do that.
So for 50, do you want to look at 53 or 54 in particular?
53.
Okay, we can look at both.
No, I want to look at 53.
Now the diagonals in a rhombus are perpendicular. So that means that the measure of angle 1 is going to be 90 degrees. And it also means that measure of angle 6 is 90.
And probably angle whatever and whatever, like 6 and 7, or 7 and 8.
So the other two would be 90 as well.
Yeah.
Now the opposite angles in a parallelogram are congruent. So it means that angle 2 is 30.
Oh, I remember this. Okay, okay.
Because these two are going to be the same. Now, since this is a right triangle, these three angles add together to be 180. So we can take 30 plus 90 plus our missing angle and set it equal to 180. Now 30 plus 90 would be 120. And we can subtract 120 from 180, which tells us x is equal to 60. So this angle is 60, which means the measure of angle 3 is 60, which also means the measure of angle 4 for this figure is 60. And lastly, the measure of angle 5 is also going to be
60. Hey, I have one quick question.
yes.
Can I leave?
Not yet. Any other questions on 53? Questions on 54? Questions on 55 or 56?
No.
Questions on 57 or 58? Because the base angles in an isosceles trapezoid are congruent, and the ones between the bases are supplementary. So questions on 59 or 60?
No.
Questions on 61 or 62? Questions on 63 or 64? So how would we solve 65?
65.
Now, it'd be nice to know that the mid-segment is equal to half of the sum of the two bases. So we would add the two bases together and multiply it by 1/2. We can take 1/2 of 12 plus 4. Well, 12 plus 4 is 16, and half of 16 is 8. Not always, because if we subtracted these two here, we would not get to the answer. So it'd be good to have that formula written down. All right. Questions on 67 or 68? Okay. Because we would still do. Questions on 69 or 70?
Can we at least do one of them? 7.
Huh? Let's look at 68. Now, there's two ways we can go about doing this. One is using the formula, which tells us that 69, the mid-segment, is equal to half of the sum of the two bases. So 9.6 is equal to 1/2 of x plus 3. Now, the first thing we can do for this here is to multiply both sides by 2. Because on the left-hand side, the 2 times 1/2 will simplify out to 1, which will leave us with x plus 3. On the other side, we're going to do 9.6 times 2, which will give us 19.2, because the 2 times the 0.6 would give us 1.2. 2 times 9 is 18, which will give us to 19, get us to 19.2. Then we would subtract 3 from both sides. X is equal to 16.2. That would just be it. Nope. Guys. So the third, or the other base for this here would be 16.2. So for these last ones here, 69, 70, 71, and 72, we're wanting to find the value of x. Now we can use the formula to be able to solve these. So if we looked at 70, well, the mid-segment's length is 2x plus 5, is equal to 1/2 of 6x minus 10 plus 10. Well, we can do the same as we did before. We can start off by multiplying both sides by 2. On the left-hand side, we're going to distribute this 2 through the 2x plus 5. 2 times 2x is going to be 4x, and 2 times 5 is 10. Now here when we distribute the 2, well, 2 times 1/2 will cancel, leaving us with 6x minus 10 plus 10. If we can combine the like terms here, negative 10 plus 10 would give us 0. So we're really left with 4x plus 10 is equal to 6x. Now, to get the variables on the same side, we would subtract 4x from both sides, which will tell us that 10 is equal to 2x. And last but not least, we would divide both sides by 2, telling us x is equal to 5. For 71 and 72? Yes. So we would do it the exact same way as we would do the other ones, because we would set this up using the formula and then solve for the value of x. Yes. Are there any other questions on these here? So your test is on Monday, and you need to have all of your assignments turned in by the end of the day Monday.
We hold on to this or I'll forget it. Thank you.
Y'all have a good